Welcome back to Wallflowers. So today I've decided to make some apple cider vinegar, and because I'm making that, you make that from the waste of the apple, so the peels, the cores. I'm also making some apple pie filling with syrup. So as I peel the apple, I'm taking the core out and I'm adding it to my bucket, and also the peelings along the way are going in the bucket too. So that's my collection getting ready to make the apple cider vinegar. When the Americans make this, they'll literally just do apple slices, but I want them to be in chunks so I can fit them in the bowl better. So what I've done so far is I've added 120 mils of lemon juice into a bowl of water, and I'm just dunking the apples in as I chop them up. It's meant to stop them going brown, but a few of them still will on the way. So this recipe actually called for £6 of apples. Now I've got just over £5, so I thought I'll make the same amount of syrup, and I'll just crack on with the same recipe. So if there's any spare, there's some spare, I can use that. So the jars I've decided to use today, the Americans use quart jars, and they say it'd be 2 quart jars in order to make one large apple pie. So I've looked for the larger jars today. A friend gifted me these a while ago, so they're really large hot dog jars, and I thought they'd be great. So I should imagine they're basically equal to a quart jar. So I'm going to use those. As you know, I use recycled jars anyway. So that's what we're doing today. Apple pie filling with a nice syrup. And then the waste will lead on to a second video, which will be the apple cider vinegar. I'll get through these and I'll come back and show you when we're ready to make the syrup. So at this point the apples are all done, so I've been trying to weigh them down with a little board. We've had to stop to have some food in between, so now I'm about to carry on to do the syrup. So to make the syrup, it's 4.5 cups of sugar, based on the American recipes. So I've measured that out in the bowl and I'm about to put that in the pan. So that's 4.5 cups of sugar. We want a tablespoon of cinnamon, and we want a teaspoon of nutmeg, and we want 2 teaspoons of salt. So if you come in closer, Mr. Wallflowers, and just see inside the pan what we've got. So this is basically my jam pan that I use, so I'm just stirring in the salt, the nutmeg and the cinnamon into the sugar, making sure it's all evenly mixed. Well, that smells lovely already. The recipe did call for a teaspoon of cloves, but it was optional and I didn't have any, so we've gone without. Now put the heat on a medium heat. I'm going to add to that 5 cups of water. I've already measured that out in the jugs. And then we're going to bring this to a boil. I just want to make sure all that sugar's dissolved. You can already see the colour's quite dark. Excuse me. So whilst we're bringing that up to a heat, we don't want to leave it unattended, so I'm right next to it. In this pan separately, I've also got 5 cups of water, and I'm adding gelatine. I'm going to stir that in, make sure we get rid of any lumps. Now, when we see a recipe for apple pie filling, sometimes it'll say add cornstarch, and the American recipes now, a lot of them call for something that's called clear gel. So the closest we have really is gelatine. This one's a Polish version I bought in the local Polish shop. So I'm using that today. The reason they don't use the corn flour is because once you've canned it, it separates in the jars, but it really isn't a problem. Once you give the jar a good shake, it's okay. So if you only have corn flour and you wish to use that, just use it. I just decided to give the gelatine a whirl. I mean, obviously it's no good for vegans, but we're not vegan, so we're quite happy with it. Just keep bringing this up to a heat. And that was cold water I added the gelatine to, and it was cold water I started off with this one, so it's only heating in the pan. Now this isn't actually a caramel, this is basically a syrup, but I'm sure once it's gone through this process and then through the canning process, it'll be quite caramelly. Anyway, so it should be quite nice. I mean, obviously if you don't like the cinnamon and nutmeg flavours, you don't have to add them, but my son really likes these flavours and I don't mind them at all, so I want to do it close enough to the true recipe I possibly can. So I'm looking forward to this. I think I showed you in the earlier slot, we're using quite big jars. I'm trying to get them close enough to the American size quart jars. And I've got 7 washed there, but I'm not sure how many I'll actually get out of it. So if I get 6 or I get 5, I'll be quite happy. And they'll take us through the winter, as we know. The prices for everything's going up at the moment. You know, the government are swindling us at the moment. They're saying they're giving us £200 towards fuel costs, but they're not giving us anything to basically set us up for a fall, because it's a loan. We've got to pay it back, so you've got to pay £40 a year back for it. Obviously this is in the UK. So we've got national insurance contributions, the price of that's going up, everything and anything, the price of food in the shops is shooting up. So the more that you can preserve and put on the pantry shelf for your use for your family, the better, you know, more low cost. I mean, I must admit these apples are shop bought, because we're in the wrong time of the year for any produce to be really coming out the garden. But most of those apples I bought from food initiatives, local cheap areas, so I've still done it on a really low budget, which is the way I shop all the time. So after this recipe, I would say I should have 5 to 6 jars of apple pie filling that I can pull out at any time. Then, as I already mentioned, with the waste and with the cores, I'll actually have approximately 5 litres of apple cider vinegar. So, you know, the low cost I paid for those apples, I think in total it probably comes to about £1.50, £2 maximum that I've paid for over £5 worth of apples. So to get, you know, 5-6 really large desserts that I only have to put a bit of pastry with, or even just add ice cream or have on its own if I choose, and 5 litres of cider vinegar, all in for £2, we can't really complain. And of course, with this being shelf stable, the apple cider vinegar being shelf stable, it's no added cost for freezing, refrigerating or anything like that. So it's a bonus all round really. So as you can see, this is gradually coming up. It may take a while. Literally just put that to a warm heat. And now I'm going to add the gelatin to it. Hopefully this should slightly start to thicken. Obviously that water's now got to warm up as well. I'm actually going to watch that whilst I start to half fill some of the jars. As I say, I left this and walked away whilst we had some food. It's getting late on in the day here now, so some of the top ones have actually gone a bit, oh look, messy Mary Ann again. I'm just going to half fill each jar, and then I'll add some caramel, half fill again. Thank you, Mr. Wallflowers. I'll pop in and out and do both. You good? You've got your eye on the ball. So there we go, half of that. I'll start off with 5 and see how far we get. Some large slices in between, but I've done the majority of them just basically a bit larger than cubes. I think that'll help me debubbling, I believe, when we've completely filled the jars up, because we don't want any bacteria trapped in them. I could have picked a bigger spoon, couldn't I? Slotted spoon is better, I'm not getting all the liquid up with it. So I'm going to stop at 5 at the moment and see how far we get. But obviously I've got the other halves to fill up, and it looks like I've probably used about at least half of it. Bring this to a little bit of a higher temperature. I've got some really thin sticks ready for debubbling and going around the outside. It's just a matter of waiting for that. See the bubbles coming gradually just around the outside, really tiny. So, as you've heard me say before, the jars are hot. Although the apples are cold, the syrup will be hot, so therefore we need the water in the canner to be hot. So it's hot jars, hot liquid, hot canner. If we're doing everything cold, it's cold jars, cold liquids, cold canner. So with this one I need the canner heated up. Seems like there's a lot of liquid in there for 5 jars, so I do hope I get an extra one. But we'll be happy with whatever we get. Okay, this might take a while, so I'll come back to you when it comes to a nice boil. Okay, so here we are, just about ready, coming up to a boil, a rambling boil. Just make sure it's completely around the outside as well as in the middle. Make sure it's boiled enough. About 30 seconds. Okay, that should be long enough. Now I need to add 3 tablespoons of lemon juice. So when you're doing this recipe and you're canning it, you must not leave out the salt and you must not leave out the lemon juice, because they're what you need specifically for the canning process. Obviously the lemon juice for the acidity. I'm hoping this slightly thickens up. It's not always straight away as I thought I might. It'll take a minute. Just going to bring this back to the heat for a minute just to make sure it thickens up a little bit. I'm hoping that thickens up because it looks a little bit thin for the minute. Okay, so I slightly thickened up the syrup with another 100 grams of cornstarch. When I added the gelatin, I'd only actually added 50 grams of it. So when I looked at what a cup, American standard cup of gelatin would equal, it was 148 grams of the gelatin. So as I'd only added 50, I've now added another 100 grams of the cornstarch. Now as you can see, it's still probably a little bit thinner than I would have liked, but I'm sure that'll thicken up during the canning process. I'm literally going to debubble the sides halfway through and make sure it's quite time consuming, this recipe, because there's so many elements to it, but I'm sure it'll be well worth time once I've put them up on the pantry shelf and I've got them to enjoy. I'm sure my son will appreciate it if no one else does. And at least I haven't wasted any of the apples that we've managed to get. this expands, I'm going to try and leave 1 inch to ½ an inch space at the top. So that's what I'm aiming for. Smaller jars, slightly smaller. A slightly smaller jar, that's the canning machine you can hear warming up in the background. Sugar, that's hot. Try not to waste any of this apple at all. Try and get every last piece in. So you don't really want to overfill these jars because apple pie filling is known for expanding, so you don't want any exploding jars. As usual, it's going to be a big clean up. So what did we say, Mr. Wallflowers? How long were we going to put this on for? 60 minutes?
No, 40 minutes on 60 degrees.
40 minutes on 60 degrees. I wish you could smell it. It smells absolutely delicious. But of course, if you make it yourself, you will be able to smell it. Make apple pies, apple crumbles, all kinds of desserts. And of course, you can use these apple fillings with pork or with meats as well. So nothing needs to be wasted. It's the canner bleeping now, so it's at the right temperature for me to put these jars in. Okay. Now, literally wet some kitchen roll with some white vinegar. Clean the tops of the jars. Nothing is going to ruin the seal. And I'm literally going to place the lids on, finger tight. Mr. Wallflowers, so just check them for me before you put them in the camera. And there we have it. I think that one might need a little bit more. Syrup. Spot the bubbles and try and debubble them before they get trapped in the canning process. But besides that, I think everything looks okay. If I hold the camera, Mr. Wallflowers, do you want to just tighten those jars for me? Only finger tight, not too tight. Okay, and we shall come back with and show you what they're like when they're completely canned.